from this time and forevermore. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Just to review a point from last week, Paul called baptism a burial in Romans chapter 6, verses 3 through 4. Saying they had been buried with him expresses the association baptism creates between the sinner and the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. But it also describes what baptism looks like. It is a burial. We also noted that John chose where he baptized because there was much water there, John 3:23. At the same time, a lot of churches use sprinkling to baptize. How do they justify that from the Bible? And most importantly, should we consider the method to be inconsequential? Before I get to arguments used for sprinkling, let me add one more passage to what we've discussed. Colossians chapter 2, verses 11 through 12 says, "In him you were also circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, in the removal of the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised up with him through faith in the working of God, who raised him from the dead." In this text, not only do we have the word baptism, which means to be immersed or submerged, but we also have the word buried. I would suggest that the imagery in these words would have meant very little if it were not the practice of the first century disciples. And if the imagery makes this kind of important connection, there would have been no desire to make exceptions. So, are there important arguments from Scripture to justify the practice of sprinkling for baptism? Well, let's begin with a reference in Mark chapter 7 and verse 4. Reading from the New King James Bible, "When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other things which they have received and hold, like the washing of cups, pitchers, copper vessels, and couches." The word washing in this text is our word for baptize in other texts. The argument is made that you wouldn't immerse a couch in water, so the word baptize can mean sprinkle or pour. Well, that sounds great, but there are two problems. First, does the word couches actually belong in the text? I had to quote from the New King James because it isn't found in all of the translations, like the American Standard Version, the New American Standard Bible, and that's because there is some question of authenticity. Personally, I think it probably belongs, but I just want you to know about that. The more significant problem is the construction of the sentence and the assumption modern readers make when they see the word couch. The couch in many living rooms is a big piece of furniture that you could not easily put in water. Even more difficult would be getting it out of the water. In some cases, you'd better unplug it first. The Greek word here referred to anything from a pallet laid on the floor for a sick person to a slightly more elaborate place to recline while eating. They could roll it up and plop it in. Getting either into and out of water would not have been difficult. Would they have immersed cups, pitchers, and copper vessels? Well, of course they would. So why are you changing the practice of how they washed the cups, pitchers, and copper vessels to a different procedure when you get to washing the couches? The text draws an equality between them to explain what the Pharisees did. We explain away the clear meaning of the Greek word so we can get water sprinkled on the head of someone as a sacrament. There is an important rule of interpretation where we should always seek an understanding of Scripture through clear statements that are readily understood and allow those to help us understand the more difficult statements. Well, if I don't make that a consistent practice, then I'm going to regularly vindicate pet doctrines with obscure passages. Remember, we want to know what God has revealed, not find out what we believe is in the Bible. Well, I have a couple more arguments in favor of sprinkling that we need to consider, and these take in the practice of infant baptism. Please join me next week as we study these.